Welcome to 10 Minutes a Day, a daily reading of the Catholic Church's social encyclicals. Today we continue with Mater et Magistra, written by Pope John XXIII in 1961.
Mater et Magistra, Encyclical of Pope John XXIII on Christianity and Social Progress, May 15th, 1961. To his venerable brethren, the patriarchs, primates, archbishops, bishops, and all other local ordinaries that are at peace and in communion with the Apostolic See, and to the clergy and faithful of the entire Catholic world. Venerable brethren and dearest sons, health and apostolic benediction. Mother and teacher of all nations, such as the Catholic Church in the mind of her founder, Jesus Christ, to hold the world in the embrace of love, that men, in every age, should find in her their own completeness and a higher order of living, and their ultimate salvation. She is the pillar and ground of the truth. To her was entrusted by her holy founder the twofold task of giving life to her children, and of teaching them and guiding them, both as individuals and as nations, with maternal care. Great is her dignity, a dignity which she has always guarded most zealously and held in the highest esteem. Christianity is the meeting point of earth and heaven. It lays claim to the whole man, body and soul, intellect and will, inducing him to raise his mind above the changing conditions of this earthly existence and reach upwards for the eternal life of heaven, where one day he will find his unfailing happiness and peace, temporal and eternal. Hence, though the Church's first care must be for souls, how can she sanctify them and make them share in the gifts of heaven? She concerns herself, too, with the exigencies of man's daily life, with his livelihood and education, and his general temporal welfare and prosperity. In all this she is but giving effect to those principles which Christ himself established in the Church he founded, when he said, "I am the way, and the truth, and the life. I am the light of the world." It was doubtless man's eternal salvation that was uppermost in his mind, but he showed his concern for the material welfare of his people when, seeing the hungry crowd of his followers, he was moved to exclaim, "I have compassion on the multitude." And these were no empty words of our divine Redeemer. Time and again he proved them by his actions when he miraculously multiplied bread to alleviate the hunger of the crowds. Bread it was for the body, but it was intended also to foreshadow that other bread, that heavenly food of the soul, which he was to give them on the night before he suffered. Teaching and example. Small wonder, then, the Catholic Church, in imitation of Christ and fulfillment of his commandment, relies not merely upon her teaching to hold aloft the torch of charity, but also upon her own widespread example. This has been her course now on nigh for 2,000 years, for from the early ministrations of her deacons right down to the present time, it is a charity which combines the precepts and practice of mutual love. It holds fast to the twofold aspect of Christ's command to give, and summarizes the whole of the Church's teaching and activity. The impact of Rerum Novarum. An outstanding instance of this social teaching and action carried on the Church throughout the ages is undoubtedly through the magnificent encyclical on the Christianizing of the condition of the working classes, Rerum Novarum, published 70 years ago by our predecessor, Leo XIII. Seldom have the words of a pontiff met with such universal acclaim. In the weight and scope of his arguments and the forcefulness of their expression, Leo XIII can have but few rivals. Beyond any shadow of doubt, his directives and appeals have established for themselves a position of such high importance that they will never, surely, sink into oblivion. They opened out new horizons for the activity of the universal Church, and the Supreme Shepherd, by giving expression to the hardships and suffering and aspirations of the lowly and oppressed, made himself a champion and restorer of their rights. The impact of this remarkable encyclical is still with us even today, so many years after it was written. It is discernible in the writing of the popes who succeeded Pope Leo. In their social and economic teaching, they have frequent recourse to the Leonine encyclical, either to draw inspiration from it and clarify its application, or to find in it a stimulus to Catholic action. It is discernible, too, in the subsequent legislation of a number of states. What further proof need we of the permanent validity of the solidly grounded principles, practical directives, and fatherly appeals contained in this masterly encyclical? It also suggests new and vital criteria by which men can judge the magnitude of the social question as it presents itself today and decide on the course of action they must take. Section 1. Rerum Novarum and its afterwards. Leo XIII spoke in a time of social and economic upheaval, of heightening tensions and actual revolt. Against this dark background, the brilliance of his teaching stands out in clear relief. Social conditions in Leo's time. It is well known the outlook that prevailed on economic matters was for the most part a purely naturalistic one, which denied any correlation between economics and morality. Personal gain was considered the only valid motive for economic activity. In business, the main operative principle was that of free and unrestricted competition. Interest on capital, prices, whether on goods or of services, profits and wages, were to be determined by the purely mechanical application of the laws of the marketplace. Every precaution was to be taken to prevent the civil authority from intervening in any way in economic matters. The status of trade unions varied in different countries. They were either forbidden, tolerated, or recognized as having private legal personality only. In an economic world of this character, it was the might of the strongest, which not only arrogated to itself the force of law, but also dominated the ordinary business relationships between individuals, and thereby undermined the whole economic structure. Enormous riches accumulated in the hands of a few, while large numbers of working men found themselves in conditions of ever-increasing hardship. Wages were insufficient even to the point of reaching starvation level, and working conditions were often of such a nature as to be injurious alike to health, morality, and religious faith. Especially inhuman were the working conditions to which women and children were sometimes subjected. There was also the constant specter of unemployment and the progressive disruption of family life. The natural consequence of all this was the spirit of indignation and open protest on the part of the working man, and a widespread tendency to subscribe to extremist theories far worse in their effects than the evils they purported to remedy. Preparing the way for a new order. It was at such time and under pressure of such circumstances as these that Leo XIII wrote his social encyclical Rerum Novarum, based on the needs of human nature itself and animated by the principles and spirit of the gospel. His message, not unnaturally, aroused opposition in some quarters, but was received by the majority of people with the greatest admiration and enthusiasm. It was not, of course, the first occasion on which the Apostolic See had come out strongly in defense of the earthly interests of the poor. Indeed, Leo himself had made other pronouncements which in a sense had prepared the way for his encyclical. But here for the first time was a complete synthesis of social principles formulated with such historic insight as to be of permanent value to Christendom. It is rightly regarded as a compendium of Catholic social and economic teaching. In this, Leo XIII showed his complete mastery of the situation. There were those who presumed to accuse the Church of taking no interest in social matters, other than to preach resignation to the poor and generosity to the rich. But Leo XIII had no hesitation in proclaiming and defending the legitimate rights of the workers. As he said at the beginning of his exposition of the principles and precepts of the Church in social matters, we approach the subject with confidence, and the exercise of the rights which manifestly appertain to us, for no practical solution of this question will be found apart from the counsel of the religion and of the Church. You well know, venerable brethren, the basic economic and social principles for the reconstruction of human society enunciated so clearly and authoritatively by this great Pope. They concern, first of all, the question of work, which must be regarded not merely as a commodity, but as a specifically human activity. In the majority of cases, a man's work is his sole means of livelihood. Its remuneration, therefore, cannot be made to depend on the state of the market. It must be determined by the laws of justice and equity. Any other procedure would be a clear violation of justice, even supposing the contract of work to have been freely entered into by both parties. Secondly, private ownership of property, including that of productive goods, is a natural right which the state cannot suppress. It actually entails a social obligation as well. It is a right which must be exercised not only for one's personal benefit, but also for the benefit of others. As for the state, its whole raison d'etre is the realization of the common good in the temporal order. It cannot, therefore, hold aloof from economic matters. On the contrary, it must do all in its power to promote the production of a sufficient supply of material goods, the use of which is necessary for the practice of virtue. It has also the duty to protect the rights of all its people, and particularly its weaker members, the workers, women, and children. It can never be the right of the state to shirk its obligation of working activity for the betterment of the condition of the working man. It is furthermore the duty of the state to ensure the terms of employment are regulated in accordance with justice and equity, and to safeguard the human dignity of workers by making sure that they are not required to work in an environment which may prove harmful to the material and spiritual interests. It was for this reason that the Leonine Encyclical enunciated those general principles of rightness and equity which have been assimilated into the social legislation of many a modern state, and which, as Pope Pius XI declared in the Encyclical Quadragesimo Anno, have made no small contribution to the rise and development of that new branch of jurisprudence called labor law.